morning, welcome to Peace, Rocks and Garden. It is March 25th, 2025, and today I've decided to put out a video on a cold storage I built back in 2021. I've been on the fence on whether I should put this video out. I've wanted to, but I've been concerned a little bit about liability reasons. It's a buried structure, and I'm not a professional carpenter. I'm not a professional engineer. I do have a solid concept of construction and physics, but this wasn't designed by anyone professional. So should you like what you see and you like the concepts and you kind of want to do something similar for yourself, but don't have those solid understandings, I highly recommend you don't build it, or you get the information and knowledge you need, or seek the advice of a professional, because it is a buried structure and it can pose significant risk should you do it incorrectly. I do feel the structure that I built is solid, and the reason for that is simply it's been many years since I initially built it, and there's been zero sign of shifting, there's been zero sign of structural fatigue, and it's been functioning as intended. There's no indication whatsoever that this is not a solid structure. But again, it was not designed by a professional engineer. So please use your discretion wisely should you decide to build something similar, and ensure that it is safe for yourself or others in its use. The second reason why I was kind of on the fence of whether it would be worthwhile to put this video out is I only have some photos basically of the initial build, because at that time I wasn't thinking about YouTube. So I was kind of not sure of the value, but I do think there is value in the photos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them up, each photo that I have, and I'm going to basically tell you what I was thinking and how I got to that point, and then put the next photo up and do that until we get to the last photo. And then I do have actually a segment of video that I took after the initial build. Basically I was getting ready to use it for the winter to store the vegetables. I will say that it's been many years since I did build this, and it works great. So with that, let's get into the video. Okay, it just dawned on me that I'm making the assumption that you're here watching the video, you know what a cold storage space is, you know why you want a cold storage, and you're just looking for some more ideas on maybe how to build yours. If that's the case, just fast forward to the house section. But if that's not, and the title caught your eye and you're curious, well, what is this all about? Cold storage is basically a space, a room, a structure that wants to maintain a constant temperature and humidity throughout the 12 months of the year. So, a certain range of temperature so that the food can be safely stored without spoiling. That's it in a nutshell. How that's achieved, you can use many different strategies, many different ways, depending on where you live, what you have available to you, the equipment you have. It could be big, it can be small, it can be above ground, it can be below ground. Again, there's a lot of different ways. It's not a new thing. Lots of people, like you've probably heard the term root cellar. That's a form of a cold storage. The key is that you're maintaining that temperature, a cool temperature, without an external power source. No electricity, no refrigeration. It's just doing it through the environment it's in. In this video, in my case up here in northeastern BC, how I achieved this is an above ground structure enclosed with wood walls, and then I buried it with soil. So that's fundamentally what a cold storage is. Um, why you might need a cold storage or would be a good idea um, can vary lots. Um, for myself, it's because we grow a lot of food. Many different reasons why I got into growing a lot of food. Try not to get into that segue too much, but we have a very short growing season up here in northeastern BC. So I don't have the availability of fresh grown produce here for a long period of time, reliant on grocery stores. Well, in the past, that wasn't so much of an issue, but COVID forward, it's become more of an issue. Costs have gone up. Food quality and reliability has gone down. So there's a lot of different reasons why I've decided to start gardening more. But it might not be that you have a large garden, but you might have available to you a farmer's market, or you want to take advantage of peak season pricing. You know, if a vegetable or a fruit is in peak season, they tend to be cheaper in the grocery store or at the farmer's market because they're readily available. And you want to take advantage of buying that in bulk. But if you do so, you have to store it. Well, if you've got a cold storage, you can do so relatively cheaply because you're not needing to keep it refrigerated and what have. So that's the whole concept of the why of a cold storage. So let's move on to how I built mine. So this is the first photo that I have. It shows the initial frame up. However, there's a couple of things you need to do prior to getting to this stage. First is site selection. If you're going to build a cold storage, depending on which type you decide to build, obviously site selection is quite important. In my case, we're above ground, so I needed a shady spot for the summer and a spot that's protected from the bitter elements of winter. So in this case here, the trees and surrounding area gives me the shade, and the trees and surrounding area also basically protect it from all the winter elements mostly. The second reason I selected this particular site is you'll notice on the left hand side there is an embankment. That just is going to help me so I don't have to fill as much. I don't require as much soil to fill around the structure. And then I also selected it because I have a fairly flat area down at the base. So I do own a small tractor. And so in prepping before I started the build, I leveled using the box blade on the tractor the ground as best as I could. And I put a slight slope front to back to allow any kind of water to drain out the back. And that also then slightly sloped the structure, so any moisture sitting on top of the structure once I bury it will also flow off and not sit on the structure itself. The other thing, of course, is making sure you have the ground prepped properly so that it is firm and compact, so that once you start building, the weight of the structure and then the weight of the soil on top of the structure is not going to then shift it and put it out of square. So I don't have hard mineral soil up here. That's just not something that really exists. So I did get it down to a very dense, compact soil and clay. The second photo here is basically the structure is now framed in and plywood on. The board across the front of the structure is to ensure that it maintains its squareness, if you will, that the walls are perfectly perpendicular and the ceiling horizontal. As I mentioned before, there is a slight front to back slope for drainage. At this point, the front wall is yet to be constructed, but I needed to wrap the structure in a thick poly plastic so that should any moisture come through the soil that I'll be using to bury, it will hit the plastic barrier and then wick off to the back and not enter into the structure itself. So once I completed wrapping the poly on, I then began to do the fill around the structure to ensure that it wasn't going to shift side to side or tilt. Okay, so this is the final photo that I have. You'll notice that I now have the front wall on, that I've begun backfilling, and there happens to be some hay on the right hand side. The poly is surrounding the whole structure, front to back, and if you look closely, you'll see that there is a beam down the center of the structure. There happens to be, I believe, 4 or 5 beams, 4x4 beams that I put inside, and that's obviously to support the center of the structure. One of the things I did do was tentatively and gently tested with the bucket of my tractor first, and then I drove on top of the structure before beginning to bury it to ensure that all points of the structure was going to be able to take the weight of the soil and that it wasn't going to shift at all. So I drove on it quite a bit and it did not move or shift. So this is why I began to bury it. I wanted to do that simply because if there was any shifting or if I noticed any portion of the ceiling giving, I wanted to address it before I put soil on, because once the soil's on, you're pretty much done. And if you need to do any adjustments, you're inside, you're at risk of collapse. So I wanted to ensure that it was fully supportive before I began to bury it. The only things that I had to do after this photo was put the second entry on the building and enclose the right side with the retaining wall and then finish the backfill. The following video shows the final product the fall that I built this structure. Enjoy. Well, cold storage 95% done. Just gotta paint the door barn red and frame it with some 6x6. I think that'll look good. There's 2 doors here and about 4 feet of soil from outside wall to inside wall, and then I've got about 2.5 feet of soil on top at the moment, and I'll be building that to 4 eventually. I got this good and solid so that I don't have any air leaks. I did insulate all in here just to help, because it isn't quite 4 feet on the inside here, and then it's a double door to help with the not letting all the cold in when you open the first door. I put power in, and I lined all the floor with plastic pallets. So should we get water in here, which I don't think we will, I'm not going to get all muddy. And then, yeah, got a shelf. I'll be putting a second shelf in for preserves and bulbs and stuff. All those are potatoes and beets. And then over here, I'll be putting another shelf in on this side. Probably a little narrower, just for more storage. I'm going to burlap all the onions. But I did insulate this outside wall and the outside ceiling here, because that's where my closest to the surface, if you will. Everything I did in here was built out of recycled material, with the exception of the plastic and the insulation. Even the screws that I used, all the lumber, where I got the used lumber from, I took out and reused, rebuilding everything. So pretty proud of that. Anyways, cold storage. Yay. Nelly. So that's the initial build. I have made some adjustments in the last 4 years. I'll put the links to some of the new videos that I have, and if you want to see how the cold storage did after that first season, spoiler alert, I was very pleased. Check out the other videos I have, the updates on the cold storage. If you found the information useful on this particular video, please hit the like. And if you're wanting to follow along on not only how I'm growing things up here in the northeastern part of BC, but also some of the projects that I do, both rock hounding or gardening, subscribe. Thanks for watching.